What up, everybody? It's Frank Muller back at it again with another video. Today, you're watching Level Up, Double Down, where we don't play around unless it's video games. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and get things started. On today's episode, we're going to be building a gaming PC on a budget. Yeah, I know. Once you've seen it once, you've seen them all before. But this time, I'm actually making it easy for the newbies to follow along. So if you've been wanting to build your first gaming PC and you have plans to do so, use this video as a guide or a resource, and I would also suggest that you add it to your favorites so it's available whenever you get around to doing so. Building PCs has been a hobby of mine for quite some time, and I consider it borderline therapeutic. Being able to take something from the ground level, build it up, and turn it into something great is one of the best feelings ever, and there's nothing like it, so I hope the feeling's mutual. Before I get into the nitty gritty, I'm going to take the time to run down a list of all the PC components being used. However, if you'd rather see me get into the action instead of sitting through the additional commentary and jargon I'll be providing related to the PC parts I selected, then by all means, you should skip to around the 11-minute mark, which is when I start the PC building process. But for those of you who decided to stick around and listen to me speak, I appreciate your patience and you won't be disappointed. Starting off with the motherboard, I'll be using the Asus TUF Gaming B550 Plus Wi-Fi 2 Edition. Keep in mind the motherboard is the most important part of the PC. Think of it as a spine that connects all the parts of the body together. It dictates what other PC parts or peripherals are compatible with it according to the chipset it's based on. The chipset in this case is B550, which is part of the AM4 platform. If you plan on building a budget PC that's somewhat modern today, I would highly implore that you look into building one based on a B550 chipset as an option, especially since it still is performant and it offers a decent amount of PCIe lanes. It'll be PCIe 3 instead of PCIe 4, but you're not going to notice much of a difference. However, there's another higher end chipset you can opt for that's part of the AM4 platform, which is X570. The main reason why someone would pick X570 over B550 is if they're needing more PCIe lanes and connectivity than what B550 offers, and those will be definitely PCIe 4 lanes. The next piece of the puzzle when building a PC, which plays an important part, is the processor, aka the CPU. You can compare it to the brain of the body. It performs calculations and processes instructions, but also it relies on the motherboard to send those instructions to other parts of the PC, including the RAM, SSD, hard drive, and other peripherals. For this build, I went with the Ryzen 7 5800X. I'll go into further detail why I chose the CPU later in the video. Can't forget about the CPU cooler. For this build, I chose to go with the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Spectrum. People always want to go back and forth over whether or not they should opt for using an all-in-one cooler versus an active CPU cooler, such as the Cooler Master Hyper 212 that I'm using currently. As long as it's not cheap, I say go with whatever fits within your budget, but also avoid using the cooler that comes included with the CPU. Of course, the 5800X doesn't come included with a CPU cooler due to it generating too much heat that a stock cooler can't even dissipate effectively. To be honest, CPU coolers have come a long way since I started building PCs back in 2007, but I've always used active or air coolers for the most part since they don't require much maintenance and you pretty much set it and forget it, and they're good enough to cool even the most heat generating processors while keeping temperatures well below TJ Maxx. And no, I'm not talking about TJ Maxx's store. It's actually short for Thermal Junction Maximum, which refers to the CPU's maximum temperature it can reach before it starts throttling its performance to prevent damage. Basically, the bigger the fans are on the air cooler, the more it helps to dissipate heat. However, there's only been 2 occasions where I use an all-in-one cooler, and the only reason why I avoid them is because over time, the coolant in an all-in-one can dry out, and that can cause problems which can potentially affect your CPU. The GPU I went with is pretty modest and it doesn't need much of an introduction. This is the Sapphire RX 6700 XT. Rumor has it that this card produces as much power as a PS5, or it may be a little bit faster, but that's neither here nor there. When comparing it to the human body, consider it akin to the eyes or the visual cortex of the computer. However, the more higher end you go, rather than having 20/20 vision, if you were to position the 6700 XT as a baseline, then the maximum would be the NVIDIA RTX 5090, which is like giving yourself 120 vision instead. And according to the Tech PowerUp's GPU database, the 5090 is 376% more powerful than the 6700 XT, which is considered overkill in my opinion. The next component for this PC is the RAM. I went with 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance DDR4 RAM, which I like because they're low profile, so they avoid any clearance issues when dealing with an air cooler. Whenever you're shopping for RAM, I would suggest that you always refer to the QVL or qualified vendors list to confirm whether it's compatible with the motherboard you're using. Also, pay very close attention to the timings, since that will determine how long it takes for the CPU to request data and how fast the RAM can deliver it. The lower the number for the timings indicates how performant the RAM will be. Overall, the main thing you should focus on is the cache latency, which is the delay from the moment a read command is issued to when the data is available. The frequency for this RAM is 3200 MHz, while the cache latency is CL16. So remember, lower is better, but that's going to come at a higher cost dollar-wise, so keep that in mind. Storage comes in many different flavors. For this build, I'll be using 3 different varieties of storage drives, starting off with an NVMe SSD, which is 1 TB from Western Digital. This is the WD Black SN750. Even though this is an older drive, the reason why I went with it is because it's PCIe 3, and as I had mentioned earlier in the video, the B550 motherboard being used maxes out at PCIe 3.0 speeds, which ensures there's no performance being left on the table. Also, as best practice, always designate an NVMe SSD as your OS drive, or make it the primary drive that you're using to install your operating system on, only if it's a feature supported by the motherboard you're using. Alongside the NVMe SSD, I'll also be using an Intel 545S 2.5-inch 512GB SATA SSD, which runs on SATA 3 speeds. This SSD used to be part of a prior PC build, but I retired it since the storage capacity of 512GB was insufficient for my purposes at that time. For this PC build, I'll be designating this Intel SSD as a scratch disk. Just to sum things up and make things simple to explain, certain programs like Photoshop will temporarily reserve storage space for things such as image and history states when a computer's RAM is full, which is why a scratch disk becomes needed. However, it's advisable not to assign your OS drive as a scratch disk. Last but not least, I'll be using a mechanical hard drive for the final PC component as it relates to storage. This is a 10 TB Seagate Barracuda Pro hard drive that was shucked from an external USB 3.0 hard drive enclosure. Contrary to popular belief, there's still a viable consumer market for mechanical hard disks due to their high rate of storage density when you take into account their price, but also when compared to their NAND flash counterparts being SSDs, they're not as volatile in nature. I'm not going to go into much detail regarding the fans, but there's a local flea market in my area that I went to and was able to find 4 of them at random, which I purchased for $1 each. 3 out of those 4 feature RGB. Although I'm not really a fan of it, it's something I've learned to live with. Now, a couple of them you might have noticed are from Cooler Master. Those are ones I've kept over the years, but what makes them good candidates to use in future builds is that they still have good ball bearings, which was my main concern. However, the mustard and ketchup wiring makes them look a bit outdated. Now for the grand finale. The final component we have going into this PC is the almighty power supply, aka the PSU, which is the only way I know of to power a PC. Now, unfortunately for me, I still didn't take my own advice if you saw my last video. I bought this power supply off eBay back in July, and the seller was advertising it as an EVGA Supernova 1000 G5. but I failed to check it at the time to confirm if I received what I paid for. And unbeknownst to me, the power supply I eventually received was actually an EVGA 850B5. Yeah, I know, it's not 1,000 watts, and yeah, it's not 80 plus gold as I intended, but instead it's 80 plus bronze. But looking on the bright side, it at least came with all the necessary cables, and I only spent $80 on it, so it wasn't that big of a loss. So to round things out, I've compiled a list of all the PC parts that are being used in this build, which also includes the cost I paid for them along with the retailer they came from. Be aware that a few of the PC parts I purchased years ago and I just retained them over time. That goes for the processor, the SSDs and the hard drive, and the chassis that I'll be placing all the parts in, which you'll get to see shortly later on in the video. Now, if you're looking to get started with PC gaming and you're interested in building your own gaming PC, there's never really a good time to buy. However, whenever buying parts, I would suggest to be on the lookout during sales, whether that be Black Friday or Prime Day, or even during times when retailers are promoting sales around other holidays. Amazon is notorious for promoting limited time flash sales that they don't even advertise on a large scale, which is how I've been able to snag a few PC parts that I've collected along the way. And Newegg does this as well, and sometimes they do it just to compete with Amazon, so keep that in mind. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and get started building this PC. Let's go! We fucking did it. Congratulations to everybody, and there you have it. Now that's how you build a gaming PC. So to anybody out there who's brand new and still stuck on the fence about building a PC in 2025, you no longer have any excuses. Yeah, I said it. I've done most of the legwork for you, so the least you could do is share this video with anybody else out there who might be interested. Overall, I think this PC build turned out to be pretty good for the most part, aside from me neglecting to check the condition of the power supply and confirming that I actually received what I paid for. If you have any ideas or suggestions you would like to make about what I should do next with this PC, let me know in the comments below. But on a serious note, I want to take some time out to shout out my brother Sko. If you're watching this video, bro, we've already discussed this. I built this PC for you. Just to clue in everybody on what I'm talking about, I want to preface this by saying that I am my brother's keeper in a literal sense. Just to take you guys on a trip through memory lane, back in 2011, my brother gave me some money to buy him parts to build him a PC. While under my guidance, I recommended what PC parts would be necessary to use, and I set the tone regarding what he should expect. To spare you guys with the long drawn out details, after he received that PC, let's just say shit went downhill from there, and I knew I let him down. The worst part about it was hearing it from my sister, which was hearsay since she used that as a pain point during an argument we had, so I couldn't live it down. My relationship with my younger brother has been rocky ever since, so I'm owning up to that. I recently got a chance to visit him out of state this past March, and at that time, we hashed everything out, and I made a commitment to him that I would commission him a PC on my own dime all by myself. So after 14 years, I'm returning him the favor. So the moral to the story is, it's never too late to make things up to the ones you love or care about. Don't do it before it's too late. So, if you made it this far into the video, I want to sincerely thank you for watching. A lot of time, money, and planning went into putting this video together. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. And without you, I'm just another unheard voice. As I wrap up this video, feel free to let me know in the comments what were your thoughts about the presentation I gave. So until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Again, this is Frank Mula signing out. Holla at me.